You
Absolutely.
might like to record.
Okay, thank you. Here we go. I've been to Romamu, I've been to BJ, I've searched all over for a place to pray. I found the mosh pit and knew that this was it. I am a moshnik and I'm here to stay. And I'm turning gray. Come on, sing it with me, Shosh. I found community that is in tune with me, singing and dancing in our Zumagog. Some contemplation mixed with elation. I am a moshnik and I'm here to stay. And we're turning gray. Oh, I hear ha. A chance to meet you, a chance to greet you, a time to deepen what it means to belong. Let's have some fun tonight and spread some joy and light. I am a moshnik and I'm here to stay. And we're turning gray. Here we go. Oh, Hoff, where are you? Okay, forget it. You don't know the song. Welcome, everybody, to what I hope will be a meaningful and evening of looking inside and coming away with some things that we can use in the coming weeks, and certainly that we can use Rosh Hashanah and most certainly on Yom Kippur. Welcome, Jessica. Welcome, Esther, Gail, Carol Ann. Welcome, Joe and Dan and Kit. In preparing for this, I asked Didi if he would lead the session. And so there was very little preparation I needed to do. But there was a curiosity on my part whether or not there is a prayer for self-forgiveness, which is what we're going to be concentrating on tonight. And what I discovered is that the answer is no. Unless, of course, we say Sha'al shechatanu lefanecha, that the individual prayer of self-forgiveness is included in the communal prayer asking for forgiveness. But there was none that I found of an individual prayer. Even in the bedtime Shema, we are praying that we're praying that other people, forgive us for things that we have done, right? Or we forgive others, but nothing about self-forgiveness. Which got me to thinking that if there was a prayer about self-forgiveness, there would have to be a reflexive verb involved there somewhere. So what is an example of a reflexive verb? It's lahitpalel, to pray. What does that mean? It means that when we pray, it's basically working on our kishkis, working on our inside, so that our relationship with divinity, which is located both outside and inside, as the Zohar says, Bimale ko olmim fasovev ko olmim, that divinity surrounds and infuses all creation. There would have to be, for self-forgiveness, a reflective verb, like lahit palel. Well, if you were with me this afternoon for our meditation, I pointed out a reflexive verb for a prayer that you are, I'm sure, all familiar with. Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tsar ma'od, right? The world is a narrow bridge, right? V'ha'ikar lo lefached klal, right? The important thing is not to be afraid. See, the only problem with Reb Nachman's words that were put to music is that he never said this. He never said it. The world is a very narrow bridge, and the main thing is to have no fear. No, the real teaching is V'da, And know this. She'adam tzarich la'avor al gesher tsar ma'od ma'od, that each and every one of us, we must cross an exceedingly narrow bridge. V'haklal v'ha'ikar shelo yitpached klal. Right, lo lefached is not a reflexive verb. Meira, you're nodding your head. Have you ever heard this teaching before? It's fabulous that we're not really loyal to his teaching in this song. So what does this mean? Haklal, the most important thing, the essence, ha'ikar shelo yitpached klal. It means do not make yourself afraid. It's a reflexive verb. It acts upon us. Do not turn yourself into your fear. Our spiritual task is not to never fear. That's impossible. Our spiritual task is to feel our fear, but then cross that narrow bridge of life anyway, with faith, courage, and dignity. So you hear that in a different way? It is not to not fear at all, as whoever made this into a song understood the teaching, but rather we acknowledge the fear and we enter into it with as much faith, dignity, and courage as we possibly can. So why do I pick that up and raise that teaching? It's because it includes a reflexive verb, for which there is no prayer for self-forgiveness that I have found yet. If you know of one or find one, I would appreciate you letting me know. And that seems to me the perfect invitation to our beloved Didi K, whose real name is David Daniel, or David Daniel. Some people want to know. I'm always referring to you as Didi. What's his name? I'm going to hand things over to you now, Didi, and I know everybody's, including myself, are in good hands.
Thank you. So I think I know pretty much everybody. I'm David Daniel Klipper, and I'm going to start. Mark, I have not tried to parse it in Hebrew, but there is a very simple prayer for self-forgiveness, which is, please, God, help me forgive myself. Please, God, help me forgive myself. Let me talk about what's going to happen during my portion of the evening. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. So I'm going to talk about various aspects of forgiveness and self-forgiveness in the context of Elul, the month we're in now that's leading up to the high holidays. And then we'll do a meditation on self-forgiveness. And after that, we will give, as for those of you to go to most services, which is almost everybody, after the breakthrough rooms, people get to share a little bit of their experience. We'll give people a chance to share. I suspect we won't have time to do breakthrough rooms before that, so we'll just go right to the sharing part. So let's talk about forgiveness in general. There's a Zen teacher named Charlotte Joko Beck, and she said, our capacity to know joy is directly related to our capacity to forgive. Our capacity to know joy is directly related to our capacity to forgive. Interesting statement. Some people might think, that doesn't make any sense. The fact that I don't forgive those SOBs that did X, Y, Z to me, how does that impact my ability to feel joy? In fact, if something bad happened to them, then I'd feel a lot of joy. But in fact, the second sentence she says as part of this quote is, don't push anyone including yourself, out of your heart. And I think that explains the connection. When we're unable to forgive, we push people out of our hearts, and our heart gets tighter. It's more protected. It's more constricted. And I'll come back to that theme again a little later when we start talking about Elul. I don't remember who said this. I don't think it was Dorothy Parker, but it was somebody that was like that was a wit. And they said, forgiveness is giving up all hope of a better past. Forgiveness is giving up all hope of a better past. And it would actually be embarrassing for me to tell you how many years of my 69 years of life I have spent wishing for a better past, that I had not given up hope for a better past. And so giving up hope of a better past is the start of acceptance. Acceptance is the start of forgiveness. Forgiveness does not mean condoning. If somebody has behaved badly to you, and the more I do, the work I do of spiritual direction or being in recovery, the more people I meet who have been really significantly wounded by things that other people did to them, often in their early lives. And I don't condone those actions, and neither should they, the people that receive the abusive behavior. And forgiving somebody doesn't necessarily mean that you have a relationship with them afterwards. But forgiving somebody, to me, means letting go of the resentment. In addition to the wish that it had been different, often what accompanies that is resentment. And the definition of resentment that I like is that resentment is a poison that I drink in the hope that someone else will die. Resentment is a poison that I drink in the hope that someone else will die. And one of my spiritual practices is when there are people where it would seemingly be quite logical and understandable and acceptable and maybe even justified for me to have a resentment, I pray for those people. I pray that they are happy. I pray that they are free from suffering. I pray that they have meaningful work and satisfying personal relationships and a deep spiritual connection. I pray for everything I would want for myself. And the reason I do it is I don't want to walk around consumed with resentment. The use of the word forgiveness is troublesome for some people, and perhaps particularly so when we're using it in the context of self-forgiveness. If I'm looking at forgiving myself, one way of interpreting that is I've done something that needs forgiving. I'm a bad person. So there is the potential that for some people, the use of the word forgiveness in self-forgiveness could increase shame instead of alleviating shame. So if the word forgiveness in the context of self-forgiveness is troublesome for you, I have a couple of substitutes. I hold myself with acceptance and compassion. I hold myself with acceptance and compassion. I acknowledge my faults and I care for myself. And I am worthy of care. I acknowledge my faults, I care for myself, and I am worthy of care. I heard a meditation teacher that had come from, I think it was Japan, but it might have been India, to teach in the United States. And he was teaching compassion meditation. And in compassion meditation, one offers compassion for usually people that one feels neutral about, for oneself, for people one loves, for people one has difficulty with. And this person was teaching in colleges and was stunned to find out that the college students were unable to offer themselves compassion. They were unable to offer themselves compassion. And the Dalai Lama was once teaching meditation, and Sharon Salzberg, who's a Jewish Buddhist meditation teacher, asked the Dalai Lama, "What about self-hatred?" And the Dalai Lama turned to his translator, and they discussed it, because I've heard the translator tell this story as well. The translator and the Dalai Lama discussed it for 8 minutes before the Dalai Lama understood what self-hatred meant. Mark says there's no prayer for self-forgiveness in our Hebrew liturgy. There's no word for self-hatred in the Tibetan language. He didn't get it. But we all get it, because we live in a culture that is riddled with self-blame, feelings of inadequacy, feelings of inferiority. And it is so much a part of the culture that it's like water to the goldfish. We don't even notice it. And we don't even notice, as the goldfish doesn't, if you don't change the water gets awful dirty, but the goldfish can't tell. Why? Well, for one thing, this is a culture which was formed predominantly by Christians. And Christians have this quaint belief that's called the doctrine of original sin. I am not a Christian theologian, not even a Jewish theologian, although I'm better at that one. But as I understand it, the doctrine of original sin means that we are sinners. We come out of the womb bad people. I personally think that's 180 degrees facing the wrong direction. I think it's totally wrong. And I challenge you to show me a newborn baby that's a bad person. I challenge you to show me a newborn baby that's done anything deliberately bad to another person. And I'm not talking about crying at 2 o'clock in the morning or pooping 3 times within 15 minutes, or the other lovely things that newborn babies do. So the culture starts with you're bad. But then we add capitalism to it, and we add media to that. And with that comes advertising. And almost every advertisement you see, hear, listen to is based on the premise that you are inadequate or insufficient. But if you drive this car, then you won't be. Or, what was the phrase? You deserve to have, I think it was Maybelline. I don't know. You deserve it. If you had the right hair color, if you use the right toothpaste, if your teeth were only whiter, if you only had the right logo on your shirt or on your luggage, then L'Oreal, thank you, then you'd be okay. But you're not now. Don't think you are now, because if you ever think you're okay, you're going to stop buying things so much. People that feel satisfied with themselves have no need to keep up with the Joneses. They don't care. If the Joneses buy a bigger, newer car, they're happy for them. They don't feel that they've got to overtake them. Another example of this culture. This is a great Annie Dillard story. So this Eskimo is talking to this missionary priest. And the Eskimo says, if I did not know about God and sin, would I go to hell? And the priest says, no, of course not. Why do you ask? And the Eskimo looks at him and says, well, then why did you tell me? I mean, really, why did you tell me that I'm a bad person and that I sin all the time? When if you hadn't told me and I lived in the state of innocence, I'd be perfectly fine. More seriously, research has shown that abused children blame themselves. Children that have been sexually abused blame themselves. Children whose parents get divorced blame themselves. Children that get physically abused blame themselves. They think they must have provoked it somehow, even if they're not sure how. Children of compulsive gamblers who gamble away the rent money, on some level, think they must have done something wrong. Part of this is because we need to feel, our egos need to feel like we're in control. Being out of control is terrifying. And the whole process of going from sort of babyhood to childhood to adolescence to adulthood is gradually learning how the world works and developing the persona that can function in the world so that you won't get hurt. And so the alternative to not feeling responsible is to live in a random, terrifying world. And it's easier to take responsibility. But regardless of the distorted chain of reasoning that leads to it, the fact remains that most children who have had unhappy childhoods in one way or another think they're at fault. To me, the worst word in the English language is not a 4-letter word. It's a 5-letter word. Anybody want to guess what I think it is?
Guilt.
Nope. On the right track, but not it.
Shame.
Yes, shame.
Okay, I was close.
That's right. You were close, Mel. Good job.
It's your fault and you're losing. And I feel guilty about it.
See how the cycle starts? So the difference between guilt and shame is fundamental. Guilt, in its essence, means I did a bad thing and I feel remorse about it. Shame means I am a bad person. I did a bad thing, or even I didn't do a bad thing, but I did a bad thing and I am a bad person. And there's a huge difference. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody does bad things once in a while. Doesn't make them bad people. But people with shame think that they're bad people. Another story. You're walking in the woods and you see a dog under a tree. And you think, oh, how cute, a doggy. And so you walk up to the dog and you reach out your hand to pet it. And the dog draws back its lips, bares its fangs, lurches at you, barks, ferocious. And you go from being friendly to the dog to being angry in a second, in less than a second. Bad dog. Bad dog. And then you walk a little closer and you see that one of the dog's hind legs is caught in one of those bear traps that close together. And then there's a shift again. And now it's, oh my gosh, this poor thing. You still don't go try and pet the dog. Dog's going to bite you. But you feel sad for the dog. You feel compassion for the dog. You wish that the dog wasn't in the trap. The basic understanding, and if I had time, I would try and tie it to Mark's talk about the Nachman line, but I don't, so I won't. But the basic understanding about people is that each of us, every one of us, has our paw caught in a trap. And when we realize that everyone, including ourselves, then our hearts begin to soften. Then our hearts begin to soften. And so when we think of ourselves as bad people, people that are worthy of shame, I don't know if worthy is the right word, deserving of shame, we're only seeing the harm that's been caused and the sense of it's my fault. We're forgetting the suffering that might have caused us to cause the suffering. There's an old saying, hurt people hurt people. There's a reason for that saying. It's true. And we're forgetting that deep down, our deepest longing is not to cause harm. Our deepest longing is for connection, for love, for peace, for joy. the pure souls that the babies all start off with before the world makes them steadily contract. We're forgetting the larger dimension of our being. We're fixated on the small picture. So, why is self-forgiveness especially important during Elul? And I think the answer falls into two categories. There's kind of an obvious part, and there's a subtle part. So the obvious part has to do with what Reb Mark opened with. It's not in our liturgy. There's not even a prayer for it. It's all about what harm did we do to somebody else? How can we do teshuvah? And I'm going to digress for a second, forgive me. But to me, asking somebody to forgive you is not doing teshuvah. Asking somebody to forgive you, in my book, and this I'm only speaking for myself now, asking somebody to forgive you is pretty inadequate. Maimonides says that the test of teshuvah is if you're in the same situation and you engage in different behavior, then you know that you perform teshuvah. Well, that has to do with one's inner self. It doesn't have to do with the other person. It has to do with one's inner self. And so the Rambam is saying that teshuvah is a process of change. And although teshuvah is typically translated as repentance, the root of the word actually means to turn. It's to turn back. To turn back to what? To turn back to the sanity, the pure soul that we started off with, that had no desire to hurt somebody, out of which we naturally want to make amends. I like the word amends because amends has mending. If your pants rip, you mend them and then they're not ripped anymore. You don't say to your pants, please forgive me for ripping you. You sew them up. And sometimes it's obvious what to do. If you've stolen money, you don't go to somebody and say, gee, I'm sorry, I stole your money. Would you forgive me? You give them the money back. And if you're not willing to give the money back, then I question the sincerity of the apology. So to me, true teshuvah entails fixing what broke. Sometimes you can make amends, sometimes you can't. Sometimes reaching out to somebody would cause more suffering, so you have to not do it. But I don't know, just asking somebody to forgive you, I don't know, half-baked to me. But I digress. But I warned you I would digress. Back to self-forgiveness in the Elul and the two reasons. One is that we do focus on what we've done wrong. Appropriately so. We should. Shouldn't be doing it once every 365 days either. In fact, if you're married and you only focus on what you've done wrong once every 365 days, I predict a short and exciting marriage. Because my experience of being married is that one has to look at when one has been wrong quite often. And if one is not eager to do so, one spouse is usually helpful in encouraging us. St. Jerome once said, if you're not arguing, you're not married. But we focus on what we've done wrong. And the intention is it's not framed in the sense of, let's look at your wounds. Let's look at the areas where you've been damaged. Let's see how that has affected somebody else. And let's treat ourselves with compassion as we wish to treat others with compassion. It's not how it's verbalized, unfortunately. So, in order to prevent shame from taking us over, it's important to forgive ourselves. Forgive ourselves doesn't mean tolerating the bad behavior. We have to do teshuvah, we have to change. But we need to forgive ourselves so we don't get mired in the misery of excessive guilt and shame. And the other reason is that if we don't forgive ourselves, if we're caught in shame, then our hearts are constricted and contracted, and we're frightened, and we're uncomfortable. So let's say that I said something to Reb Mark, and I hurt his feelings, and I realize that I hurt his feelings, but I'm filled with shame. I'm a terrible person. I'm guilty. I'm afraid. Is he going to hurt me? Is he going to make me feel even worse? And I apologize. My apology may be sincere in a certain sense, but let's say what Mark needs is to tell me how he felt, how what I said made him feel. Maybe he needs to say that. Maybe he needs to say it at some length. How capable am I going to be to hear that if I'm in shame? I don't think I'm going to be very capable at all, because I'll hear it all through the lens of I'm bad. And every time Mark says, and that made me feel bad in this way, I'm going to be, whip myself. But if I can forgive myself, if I can be whole, if I can be at peace with myself and accept who I am, faults and all, then I can say, of course. Oh, of course it made you feel that way. I'm so sorry. I wish I hadn't done that. And I hope I never do it again. But, it must have really felt bad. And Mark will experience that teshuvah very differently. So I would say that even if you think the self-forgiveness stuff is all bogus, I would argue that it's necessary anyway, even to do the traditional apologize for what you did wrong, to do it with a full heart. So just a couple more things, and I'm going to wrap this up. We live in a culture where love and compassion and forgiveness are considered soft words, and anger and aggression are considered strong. But the real courage is to forgive ourselves. A famous Buddhist teacher said, the essence of human bravery is refusing to give up on anyone or anything, including ourselves. And the poet Donna Falls wrote, do you value your reasons for staying small more than the light shining through the open door? Forgive yourself. Perfection is not a prerequisite for anything except pain. Please, oh please, don't continue to believe in your stories of separation and failure. This is the day of your awakening. Self-forgiveness is really a one-shot thing. You do it, it's over, never bothered by it again. Because these patterns that we are trying to reverse are deep. So it's over and over again. It has its own timing. And we need to forgive ourselves for that, for being slow. And also, what keeps us stuck is often rooted in such a deep sense of woundedness and frequently trauma that it requires support. So we really need the support of others, friends, groups, spiritual directors, therapists. Sometimes we have to imagine others forgiving us before we can forgive ourselves. But it can be done, and it is worth doing. And now I would like to take us through a guided meditation on self-forgiveness. So I ask that you sit in a comfortable position where you can be alert. If you are comfortable and feel safe closing your eyes, do so. If closing your eyes doesn't feel comfortable for you, then soften your gaze so that you're not focused on any particular thing. Every week we read a portion of Deuteronomy after the Shema. Talk about the tzitzit. Why do we wear the tzitzit? So we don't pursue what we lust for through our eyes. We soften our gaze so we don't do that. And take a few seconds and do 3 slow, deep, mindful breaths at your own pace. And now do a quick scan of your body. See if there are any areas of tension where you're holding tension in a particular part of your body. And see if you can let that part of your body relax. Sometimes it can be helpful to imagine breathing pure oxygen into that part of your body. Or use your imagination and imagine you're breathing in pure light to that part of your body or parts of your body. See if your jaw is clenched, your shoulders are hunched, your legs and your butt are tight. Your brow is furrowed. And if you notice any of those things or any other place of tension, just see if you can very gently, very kindly let it go as well as you're able. And To whatever degree it does or doesn't relax, let that be fine. And now, connect with your intention to open your heart to your own being. Connect with your intention to open your heart to your own being. That's right. And then bring to mind some aspect of yourself that has felt unforgivable. Maybe not the worst aspect of yourself, but some aspect of yourself. Perhaps you can't forgive yourself for being a judgmental and controlling person. Perhaps you struggle to forgive yourself because of mistakes you've made. Perhaps you struggle to forgive yourself because of the ways you've hurt others. You might not be able to forgive yourself because you feel you are ruining your life with an addictive behavior or behaviors. You might feel a feeling of disgust for some mental obsession. What feels so wrong or bad about your unforgivable behavior, emotion, a way of thinking? Allow yourself to feel the aversion that you have toward yourself. However, if that feeling or any feeling during this meditation becomes too intense, then back away. Do what you need to do. Open your eyes, stand up, walk around, exit the Zoom call. This is about self-care, not about further self-punishment, not about re-traumatizing yourself. So to the extent you can, allow yourself in a safe way to feel the aversion you have toward yourself. And I'm going to let you sit with that for a little while. And now, explore more deeply what is driving this part of yourself. If you're addicted to food, alcohol, nicotine, sex, gambling, the internet, what is driving that? What need are you trying to satisfy? What fears are you trying to soothe? If you have been judging others, how have you been fearful yourself? What has been the fear that has been underlying the judgment. If you have wounded another person in some way, did you act out of hurt and insecurity? Out of the need to feel safe or powerful? Look at yourself and your vulnerability through the eyes of your most understanding and loving friend or relative or spiritual being. Allow yourself to look at yourself with the eyes of compassion that such a person would have for you. The eyes of compassion you would have to your closest friend, for your closest friend. As you become aware of these underlying wants and fears, allow yourself to feel them directly in your body, heart, and mind. Even though you dislike the behaviors that they caused, try to hold your underlying vulnerability with compassion. See yourself as you would see the dog in the woods with its hind leg in a trap. Placing your hand on your heart, send a sincere message of self-compassion directly to the places of fear and unmet needs, to the pain that has given rise to what feels unforgivable. Send a sincere message of self-compassion directly to the places of fear and unmet needs. That's right. You might mentally whisper, I see how I have caused myself suffering, and I forgive myself now. I see how I have caused myself suffering, and I now forgive myself. Or you might simply offer the words, forgiven, forgiven. Meet whatever arises, fear or judgment, shame or grief, with the message of forgiveness. Even resistance to forgiving can be met this way. Forgiven, forgiven. You might call on the presence of someone you consider to be deeply loving and understanding, and feel his or her compassion flowing into you, supporting you. Discover what happens when you bring an unconditionally forgiving heart to the parts of you that are wounded and vulnerable. If you feel unable to forgive yourself, it might be that you believe you don't deserve to be forgiven, or you fear that if you forgive yourself, then you'll just do the same thing again. Perhaps you're afraid that if you really open yourself to forgiveness, you'll come face to face with some intolerable truth. For all of us, there tends to be some barrier or barriers that stand in the way of self-forgiveness. If those barriers didn't exist, we probably would have done it long ago. So whatever these barriers are, meet them with kindliness and compassion. Barriers to self-forgiveness are another part of the woundedness. It's another aspect of the trap, holding your back paw in it. And if you're unable to forgive yourself now, say to yourself, it is my intention to forgive myself when I am able. It is my intention to forgive myself when I am able. Refrain from judging yourself on how well or poorly you think you've done this. You have done the absolute best you can with what you have. And your intention to forgive is the seed of forgiveness that grows into the willingness that will relax and open your heart. So as we prepare to close this meditation, I invite you to let go of what you've been thinking, what you've been feeling, and simply see if you can relax into 3 or 4 slow, mindful breaths. And then start to bring yourself back to this place and time. Feel your butt in your chair, your hands in your lap. Listen to the ambient sounds around you. And when you are ready, open your eyes. So we only have about 5 minutes or so. Obviously not enough time for everyone to share. I encourage you to consider writing about this experience if something emerged for you that was valuable, and to do it again. But if there's something someone would like to share right now, the floor is open. Geneba, I hope I pronounced that right.
It is Geneva. I was struck by the contrast between asking for forgiveness and making amends. How do we make amends to ourselves when we're forgiving ourselves?
Oh my goodness, what a wonderful question that is. Treat yourself nicely. Say nice things to yourself. Write out affirmations. Put them on a Post-it note. Put them on your computer. And before you open up your computer every day, say them to yourself. I once did, for my Elul practice, I had to write down something I liked about myself every day, and I couldn't repeat myself. It's a great Elul practice. A lot harder than writing down something I don't like about myself and not repeating myself. Treat yourself nicely. Treat yourself as if the person you admire most was a guest in your home. Treat yourself like you would treat that person. That's making amends to yourself. Wonderful question. Thank you so much. And it's also fine to just sit and enjoy a little bit of silence.
Tonight helped me see how far I've come. That I used to live like a person who was always hurt. That I was raised with perfectionist, shaming parents. And for many, many years, I took on a sort of identity of I'm a wounded warrior and I'm angry, but I'm a joyful person. So, you know, I was always trying to find the balance, but there was very little self-love for a long, long time. But having been around so many of you for so many years and done so many programs and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed on this topic for many, many years, I just saw tonight how far I've come, that I don't feel wounded anymore. And I've turned all of that into the lessons that I needed to become wise. And so, I ain't perfect and I make mistakes all the time and I have days when I don't like myself a whole lot, but it's so much better than it ever was.
And it's okay.
Yeah, right? I mean, it's just, and it's so much about this kind of community affirming one another. And there's been so much affirmation here that I would be a, ridiculous liar if I didn't tell myself that I was of value and a loving human being. But thank you so much.
Great. And I'll bet 20 years ago, you wouldn't or couldn't have imagined you'd be where you are today.
Not at all. Not
Huff,
at all.
as you do so well every week in the morning blessings, bring us in for a landing.
I'm not ready.
Don't have to rhyme.
I guess I'm going to ask a simple question about no names mentioned, but what if we run across a person who is overly self-forgiving? In other words, they're not really facing the difficulties presented, but forgiving themselves so quickly that there's no room for self-reflection because they've already forgiven themselves as quickly as they wanted to.
Another fabulous question. There's a quote from Jack Handy from Saturday Night Live. Goes as follows. The first thing I learned was to forgive myself. Then I told myself, go ahead and do whatever the hell you want. It's okay by me. There's a difference between self-forgiveness and self-indulgence. Really, we're really talking about doing teshuvah with ourselves. And as we talked about before, teshuvah is about a change in behavior. So the person that's so quick to forgive themselves, their behavior isn't changing. Oh, I ate 2 quarts of ice cream, but I forgive myself. Well, guess what they're going to do the next night? They're going to eat another 2 quarts of ice cream. And then guess what they'll do the night after that? That's not forgiving yourself. That's actually, in a sense, abusing yourself. And somebody who isn't willing to look at their behavior and see where they're causing pain to others or to themselves, that's not the work we're talking about here. So I think it's a great question. Yeah, Dan is saying, I think I didn't see the whole text, but yeah, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. But the work we're talking about is having an open heart. And to say, oh, it's okay, it's fine, I can do whatever I want. I can steal money, eat the 2 quarts of ice cream, spend all night on the internet, whatever it is, whatever destructive or self-destructive behavior it is. You're not coming at that with an open heart, a full heart and an open soul. You're still constricting your heart. You're just avoiding feeling the pain of your own shame by saying, oh, it's okay. It's fine. So if you meet somebody that's too quick to forgive themselves, I would feel compassion for them because they're people that are probably going to keep doing things that make them unhappy or make other people unhappy, and they're not likely to change. So I would hold them with compassion if I could. And with that, I want to thank you for the blessing of allowing me to share with you tonight. I really am grateful for it. And I turn it back to you, Reb Mark.
Thank you, Didi. Yashikoch. Beautiful, deep, profound sharing, gift. It's a better word that that you gave for us tonight. Thank you. So, when I was researching whether or not there was a bracha or a ritual for self-forgiveness, although I didn't find a traditional one, there were plenty to be found that were written by modern Jewish sources that have not yet found their way to being codified. So I would like to share with you, and I will send this around to all of you, because I took your picture. I don't know when it was. It appeared in Lilith magazine at some point. And I'm not reading the whole thing, but just reading where it begins with, I forgive myself. And then I'm going to screen share with you, because this is all about teshuvah, as Didi, you pointed out, repentance, yes, returning to what? Returning to that perfected soul that is a redeemed self, and leads to a redeemed world. So here's the writing, and then I'm going to screen share some words of a song that I'm going to invite you to sing along with. I forgive myself. I forgive myself for following and sometimes perpetuating and not yet fully being free of false standards of beauty for all genders. I forgive myself for self-loathing, for self-doubt, for hating and maligning the being that the divine has placed on this earth, and the body I have been granted to walk in alongside spirit. I forgive myself for walking too hesitantly, for walking too aggressively, for thinking there is anything wrong with the way I walk in the world. I forgive myself for staying quiet sometimes, and for being too loud other times, and for not knowing what to say when it was at the tip of my tongue and I was just too scared. I forgive myself for dumbing myself down, for acting way too smart, for getting competitive, and for backing off completely. I forgive myself for apologizing all the time, for pretending I don't have a right to take up space, for carrying stories of guilt and revenge and poison with me that have only held me back. I forgive myself for carrying stereotypes for men as well as women that have hurt our own sense of the divine feminine. I forgive myself for not being perfect all the time, for thinking I'm too perfect some of the time, for forgetting that I am a work in progress, and even if there is room to improve, I can still forgive and move forward. I forgive myself for not always listening, for assuming my stories are the same as everyone else's, and for shouting at the others that don't listen. I forgive myself for believing that the only way through this is to smash it all down, when perhaps with compassion, we can heal and rebuild. I forgive myself. Please forgive me. Slach lanu, machal lanu, kaper lanu. On the right-hand side of the page. This is the time for returning to the one from where I've come from. Who am I? Who am I? Where am I? Echo that. Where am I? When will I be the one who I was meant to be? Who am I? Who am I? Where am I?
Where am I?
When will I be the one who I was meant to be? This is the time for returning to the one from where you've come from. Who are you?
Who are you?
Where are you?
Where are you?
When will you be the one who you were meant to be? Who are you?
Who are you?
Where are you?
Where are you?
When will you be the one who you were meant to be? This is the time for returning to the one from where we've come from. Who are we?
Who are we?
Where are we?
Where are we?
When will we be the ones who we were meant to be? Who are we?
Who are we?
Where are we?
Where are we?
When will we be the ones who we were meant to be?